My name is Margaret, and I was in my garden sketching out a new irrigation plan for the hydrangeas when the doorbell chimed. A March afternoon in Portland was, for me, usually a time of absolute peace. Retirement, I'd found, was finally offering what 40 years of faculty meetings and grading papers never could: time. Time to read, time to plan my garden instead of course curricula. The bell rang again, this time with more insistence. When I opened it, my son, Matthew, was standing on the porch, grinning like he'd just won the lottery. A woman I'd never laid eyes on before was standing right beside him, her hand resting on his arm with a kind of polished ease. "Mom, we're engaged." The words just tumbled out of Matthew before I even had the chance to ask them inside. "I wanted you to meet her right away." That, right away, was what struck me first. No phone call, no, "Mom, I'm seeing someone special." Just this abrupt presentation, as if he were showing off a new car he'd bought on a whim. "Well, come in," I managed, stepping back. "This is certainly unexpected." I know. Matthew was practically vibrating with nervous energy as they came into the foyer. "But when you know, you just know, right?" The woman extended her hand to me. "Celeste Morgan. I've heard so much about you, Margaret. Matthew says you were one of the most beloved professors at the university." Her handshake was firm, confident. Her manicure was expensive, the French tips looking very recent. "Beloved is generous," I replied. "Tenured is more accurate. Please, call me Margaret." She smiled, but her eyes immediately began to catalogue my entryway. They swept across the original crown molding, paused on the walnut banister, and seemed to be calculating the dimensions with a professional assessment. "This craftsmanship is just extraordinary," she said. "You just don't see this quality anymore." "It was built in 1923, I said, watching her absorb that piece of information like an appraiser taking inventory. We moved into the living room. I offered them coffee, which they accepted. As I was in the kitchen preparing the French press, I could hear Celeste's voice clearly, asking Matthew about the house's square footage, the property lines, and the neighborhood's development patterns. Her voice had that smooth, professional clip I recognized from years of departmental budget meetings, the sound of people who measure value long before they appreciate beauty. "So," I said, returning with the tray, "tell me how you two met." Matthew launched into the story with almost too much enthusiasm. It was a networking event, an industry connection. She was consulting for a luxury real estate firm. He was giving a presentation on sustainable development. Their eyes met across the conference hall. "Very cinematic," Celeste supplemented, adding precise details. "I work with high net worth clients, primarily. Property portfolios, investment strategies, estate transitions." She managed to use the phrase, high net worth, 3 times in less than 5 minutes. When I met Matthew, his passion for ethical development really impressed me. So many people in our industry just chase profit. "What about your family?" I asked. "Where are they?" She deflected the question smoothly. "Seattle originally, but we were never very close. I prefer looking forward rather than back. Matthew has told me wonderful stories about you, though. Retired professor, widow, this beautiful home. He clearly got his intelligence from you." The compliment felt rehearsed. I just sipped my coffee and said nothing. "Actually, Mom," Matthew said, pulling a thick stack of papers from his messenger bag. "Celeste suggested something I think shows real maturity. A prenuptial agreement, just for transparency and mutual protection." He handed me the document as if it were proof of her virtue. I put on my reading glasses slowly, buying myself time to process this new development. The contract was thick, 20 pages of dense legal language. "This is thorough," I commented. "My attorney drafted it," Celeste explained. "I believe in protecting both parties. Marriage is a partnership, but smart partnerships have clear terms. Don't you agree, Margaret?" I flipped through the pages. Clause 7. All family assets acquired during marriage subject to equal division. Family assets, not marital assets. The distinction was glaring. Clause 12. inheritance received during marriage becomes marital property after 1 year. Has Matthew had independent legal review for this? I asked. Mom, it's fair. Celeste wouldn't, I'm sure, I interrupted gently. It's just standard practice, sweetheart. Any major contract deserves 2 perspectives. Matthew looked wounded. Celeste immediately touched his arm, redirecting his attention with that subtle pressure. Would you like to see the rest of the house? She asked me. I'm fascinated by this period's architecture. We toured the rooms. She photographed the crown molding, supposedly for inspiration, but her angles captured more than just the decorative details, they captured room layouts. In my master bedroom, she paused by the window overlooking the garden. Such a large house for one person, she observed. Have you considered what happens to it, eventually? The question landed with calculated weight. Eventually is a long way off, I hope, I replied. Of course, she smiled. I only meant that estate planning is crucial. Matthew mentioned you haven't updated your will recently. Did he? My tone cooled considerably. That's a private matter between a mother and her son. She backtracked with professional grace. Families should discuss these things openly. It prevents misunderstandings later. I prefer preventing misunderstandings now, I replied. Back downstairs, Matthew checked his watch. We should go. We have a reservation at 6 o'clock. At the door, Celeste hugged me with a calculated warmth. I'll take good care of him, she whispered against my shoulder. And I'm so glad we'll be family. The emphasis she put on family sounded possessive. After they drove away, I stood in the doorway, still holding the prenup. Small details began to accumulate in my mind, like structural defects you notice during an inspection. The diamond bracelet she wore, 3 carats, minimum, was worth more than 6 months of a consultant's salary. The designer handbag. Her detailed knowledge of inheritance law, which far exceeded casual interest. Her questions about my will before she'd even asked about my favorite books or hobbies. I walked to my study, spread the contract across my desk, and began making notes. I circled Clause 12. I underlined Clause 7. In the margin, I wrote one word, why? The weeks after their visit crawled by with a suffocating normalcy. Matthew called regularly, and each conversation inevitably steered toward wedding plans, venues, guest lists, color schemes. I responded with the appropriate enthusiasm, asked the appropriate questions, and played the role of the supportive mother. The prenuptial contract sat in my study drawer. Twice, Matthew asked if I'd reviewed it thoroughly. Twice, I deflected, saying I was still reading through the details. The truth was, I'd read it 17 times. Each reading revealed new concerns buried in the legal language. But concerns weren't evidence. They were only instincts, and instincts don't convince sons who are blinded by infatuation. Mid-April arrived with unusual warmth. My former colleague from the university, Barbara Chen, called about meeting for lunch downtown. She wanted advice on her retirement planning, how to transition from a full-time practice to consulting work. I agreed. The restaurant she chose, the Cascade Room, occupied a renovated warehouse in the Pearl District. I arrived 15 minutes early, a habit from decades of adhering to class schedules. The hostess seated me at a table near the window. Good natural light. I reviewed the menu, wondering if Barbara would be late, as usual, when movement across the restaurant caught my attention. I looked up and went completely still. Celeste. She was sitting at a corner table, partially obscured by a decorative column. A man in an expensive suit sat across from her. Early 40s, dark hair, a confident posture. Their body language screamed intimacy. She leaned close, her hand covering his on the table. His thumb stroked her wrist with a familiar, easy gesture. My first instinct was to stand, march over there, and demand an explanation. My hand was halfway to pushing back my chair when 40 years of academic discipline overrode the emotion. Confront her now with what? Having lunch with someone? She'd have an explanation ready, a business meeting, an old friend, an innocent coincidence. I needed more than a single observation. I needed a pattern. I signaled the waiter. "Excuse me, could I move to that table instead?" I gestured toward a spot where a large potted plant would provide partial concealment. The lighting is a bit better for my work papers. From my new position, I had a clear sight line, but they couldn't detect me. I pulled out my phone, pretended to check messages, and activated the camera. Through the foliage, I photographed them. For 20 minutes, I watched with the attention to detail I'd once applied to grading a thesis, cataloging every gesture, her fingers tracing his forearm, his hand briefly touching her cheek, the way they shared a dessert with a single fork, laughing at some private joke. When the waiter brought their check, the man paid without hesitation. I could see an expensive bottle of wine and multiple courses on the bill, even from my distance. They were comfortable together, practiced. This wasn't a first date or a second meeting. This was an established relationship. When they prepared to leave, she kissed his cheek and lingered there, her lips near his ear. He whispered something that made her laugh. Not the polite, measured laugh she'd used in my living room, but something genuine and unguarded. They exited separately, a professional caution that suggested they understood the need to hide. I waited 5 full minutes, paid my own bill quickly with cash, and followed them to the parking area. The man climbed into a black Mercedes sedan. I photographed it, capturing the license plate clearly. Barbara Chen arrived 20 minutes late with profuse apologies about traffic. I barely registered our lunch conversation. My mind was churning through implications, possibilities, and strategies. After we finished, I drove directly to the office of Philip Tawes, a journalist I'd known for 20 years through university networking. "Philip, I need a favor," I said. "A discreet one." He looked up from his computer. "Discreet usually means trouble." "Information only," I said. "License plate to a name." He studied my expression. "Legal trouble?" "Family trouble," I replied. "I need to know who someone is before I make any decisions." Philip leaned back in his chair. "Remember when I needed that assessment on the Thurman house, and you found those historical zoning issues? You probably saved me $50,000. "I remember," I said. "Consider us even." He took the plate number I'd written down. 30 minutes and 2 phone calls later, he had the information. Daniel Kraus. Real estate agent at Premier Properties Northwest. Specializes in luxury estates. Over 2 million. I searched for Daniel online while still in Philip's office. I found his professional profile with a photograph. Same man from the restaurant. Match confirmed. Now I needed depth. I researched Portland private investigators that evening, selecting a Marcus Webb based on his specialty, financial fraud and infidelity cases. His office occupied a modest suite downtown. Webb himself was unremarkable. Mid-40s, average build, a forgettable face, perfect for surveillance work. I explained the situation concisely. My son's fiancée. A suspicious prenuptial agreement. An intimate lunch with another man. I need her background investigated, particularly her romantic history and financial patterns. Webb quoted his rates without emotion, $150 an hour, plus expenses. "Whatever it takes," I said. "I want a comprehensive report." He asked only one question. "If I find what you're afraid I'll find, what will you do?" I met his eyes steadily. "Protect my son." He nodded and took my retainer check. 2 weeks. I'll be thorough. Those 2 weeks stretched like 2 months. I maintained a normal facade with Matthew. Our weekly dinners resumed. Wedding planning discussions continued. Celeste joined twice, performing her role perfectly, affectionate to Matthew, respectful to me, asking my opinion on ceremony details. Each time I smiled, offered suggestions, and watched her with this cold, new understanding. She was good. She was really good. If I hadn't seen her with Daniel, I might have believed the performance myself. But I had seen it, and now I was just waiting for proof. Webb called on May 2nd. The report's ready. You'll want privacy when you read it. We met at his office. The folder he handed over was thick, at least 60 pages. Took some digging, Webb said, but the pattern's clear. She's done this before. Twice. I opened the folder and began reading. A marriage certificate from 2019, Celeste Morgan to Kevin Morgan, a Portland businessman. A divorce filing from 2021. Settlement, $180,000 plus a vehicle. A marriage certificate from 2022, Celeste Morgan to James Pritchard, a Seattle entrepreneur. A divorce filing from 2023. Settlement, $225,000 plus a property transfer. The photographic surveillance from the past 2 weeks showed Celeste meeting Daniel Kraus 6 times. Hotel receipts. Restaurant bills. They'd been involved at least 8 months, longer than she'd even been dating Matthew. Webb's handwritten note on the final page read, "She's getting better at this." I closed the folder and sat in silence, absorbing the complete picture. My son wasn't in love. He was a mark. A target. A transaction she'd been planning since before they'd even met. Recommendation? Webb asked. Show him this today. Not yet, I said slowly. If I approach this wrong, she'll convince him I'm paranoid. I need better timing. A complete strategy. Don't wait too long. The wedding's 4 months away? I stood, folder in hand. I won't let it happen. Trust me on that. I left Webb's office carrying a folder that weighed nothing and everything. Downtown Portland traffic blurred past my windshield during the drive home. My mind wasn't processing stoplights or lane changes. It operated on autopilot while my conscious thoughts circled a single question: how do I stop this without destroying my relationship with Matthew in the process? At home, I spread Webb's report across the dining table. Marriage certificates, divorce decrees, financial settlements, photographic surveillance. Each document was another nail in Celeste's coffin, but hammering those nails required precision. If I approached Matthew too early, she'd convince him I was jealous, controlling, unable to release him to his independent life. If I waited too long, legal protections would activate. Timing was everything. I needed expert guidance. Not an investigator's facts, but a lawyer's strategy. The next morning, I researched Portland family law attorneys online, selecting Patricia Reynolds after reading about her 23 years specializing in prenuptial disputes and fraud cases. Her office occupied a renovated Victorian in Nob Hill. I called at 9 a.m. sharp, explained briefly that I needed a consultation regarding a fraudulent prenuptial agreement. She had an opening at 11 o'clock. Mrs. Reynolds herself was a sharp-featured woman in her 50s, with a direct manner that suggested no tolerance for wasted time. I presented the situation concisely and showed her Webb's report. She studied the documents with professional intensity, occasionally making notes in precise handwriting. After 20 minutes, she looked up. Oregon's Uniform Premarital Agreement Act allows voiding contracts obtained through fraud, duress, or failure to disclose. Your challenge is proving fraudulent intent existed before the contract was signed. She explained the burden of proof, pattern of behavior, financial motivation, concealment of material facts. The previous marriages help establish a pattern. Her relationship with this Daniel person demonstrates ongoing deception. But you'll need testimony from the prior husbands. Victims willing to state she employed identical tactics. Reynolds quoted her retainer fee, $5,000 for comprehensive case preparation. I wrote the check immediately. Document everything from this point forward, she advised. Record your conversations. Oregon is a one-party consent state, which means it's legal if you are a participant. Get your son's permission to record family discussions about wedding planning. Don't tell him why yet. I left with a legal roadmap. That afternoon, I returned to Webb's office. I need you to find her previous husbands. Both of them. I need to know if they'll talk, if they'll testify if necessary. Webb pulled out his notes from the report. Kevin Morgan, the first husband, lives in Seattle. Tech consultant, divorced her 3 years ago. The second husband, James Pritchard, moved to San Francisco after their divorce 2 years back. He's harder to locate. He changed jobs, possibly to escape the association with the divorce. I authorized additional investigation expenses without hesitation. Whatever it costs. These men are key to establishing the pattern. My attorney says their testimony could void the prenuptial contract entirely. Webb accepted the assignment with a warning. Some divorce victims don't want to relive the trauma, Margaret. They might refuse involvement. Then I'll convince them, I said. They deserve to know she's doing it again. That evening, Matthew called about a weekend brunch with Celeste. She wanted to bond more with Mom before the wedding. I seized the opportunity. Sweetheart, I've been thinking, this is such a significant time in your life. Would you mind if I recorded some of our conversations? As a sort of family history project. Capturing stories, advice, memories, something you and Celeste can look back on years from now. Matthew, touched by the sentimental notion, agreed enthusiastically. Mom, that's really thoughtful. Celeste will love that. I purchased a professional recording device the next day. It was a discrete model used by journalists, voice-activated, with an 8-hour capacity. I tested it thoroughly. The audio quality was excellent. Oregon law permitted recording conversations where one party consented. I wasn't breaking any laws, just building an evidence foundation. I created an encrypted folder on my computer labeled Family Archive 2025. I began a meticulous documentation system: date, time, participants, key statements, potential legal relevance. Saturday arrived. I activated the recording device in my shirt pocket before Matthew and Celeste arrived for brunch. She entered with practiced warmth, kissed my cheek, brought expensive bakery pastries, and complimented my recent garden work. Over coffee, the conversation flowed naturally toward estate planning. Celeste initiated it smoothly. Margaret, Matthew mentioned you haven't updated your will since his father passed. That's 8 years. Estate law changes, tax implications shift. Have you considered reviewing it? I played my role perfectly, slightly confused, appreciative of her concern. Oh, I suppose I should. I've never been good with legal paperwork. You understand these matters, don't you? She leaned forward, eager. I work with attorneys regularly through my real estate transactions. I'd be happy to recommend someone. Or, we could just discuss the family situation. Understanding everyone's situation helps with long-term planning. Family planning? I repeated carefully. You mean after you and Matthew marry? Exactly, she said. Combined household finances, shared resources, coordinated investments. Modern families operate as economic units, she added. Matthew chimed in, oblivious. It makes sense, Mom. Celeste has a business degree. She's better at financial strategy than either of us. I nodded slowly, feigning elderly confusion. So, you're suggesting, what, exactly? Celeste's smile sharpened microscopically. Just transparency. Understanding what assets exist, how they're structured, what the succession plans are. It prevents family conflicts later. I noted how quickly later entered her vocabulary. She was already planning my death. I'll think about it, I said mildly. After they left, I immediately uploaded the recording, time-stamping the key moments. Her language revealed everything: combined household, shared resources, succession plans. She wasn't planning a marriage. She was planning an acquisition. Over the following 2 weeks, Celeste increased her contact frequency. She called me directly, ostensibly asking for my opinions on wedding details, venue selection, catering, the guest list, but the conversations always drifted toward my property. This house is so large, Margaret. Have you considered downsizing? Matthew and I could buy it from you at a fair price. You could move somewhere more manageable. Another time, it was about life insurance policies. Do you have adequate coverage? Matthew should be the beneficiary, obviously. But have you structured it properly? Each probe grew more blatant. I recorded everything and maintained my naive persona. Oh, you're so thoughtful to help with these things, dear. I never know what I'm doing. Internally, I catalogued her tactics with clinical precision. She was accelerating the timeline, trying to secure legal hooks before the wedding. Why the rush? Webb's new surveillance showed Daniel Kraus pressing her. Their relationship was strained by her extended investment in Matthew. She was managing two men simultaneously, and the pressure was mounting. She was making mistakes. Getting sloppy. Perfect. Late that second week, I transformed the spare bedroom into a command center. I purchased a large corkboard, colored pins, index cards, and string. At its center, I pinned Celeste's photograph from the engagement announcement. On the left side, a timeline of her relationship with Matthew. On the right, the details of her previous marriages to Kevin Morgan and James Pritchard. At the top, financial motivations, property targets. At the bottom, I listed my legal strategy options. Colored strings connected all the related elements. This visual architecture helped me see the entire pattern simultaneously, identify gaps in the evidence, and plan my next moves. I photographed the board daily, tracking the evolution of the case. One evening, reviewing the latest recording of Celeste probing about my investment portfolio, I sat in that command center and let myself feel the cold fury I'd been suppressing. She had actually said, "Well, you're 72, Margaret." I'd aged myself for the part. She said it like she was calculating the years until inheritance. Most people avoided discussing a parent's mortality. She led with it. And Matthew just nodded along, thinking she was being practical. He couldn't hear what I heard, the assessment, the calculation, the timeline. She wasn't planning a wedding. She was planning an acquisition schedule. Not while I was breathing. 3 more weeks of careful performance. 3 more weeks of recorded conversations where Celeste probed my estate planning, suggested property consolidations, and calculated my mortality like an actuarial table. Each recording added to the growing file. Each interaction strengthened the legal case Patricia Reynolds was helping me build. Then Webb called. Found Kevin Morgan. Lives in Seattle, works as a tech consultant. Divorced Celeste 3 years ago. I mentioned the investigation regarding her current engagement. He got very quiet on the line, then asked if the new victim, if my son, had children. There was a pause from Webb. When I said grown son, Kevin said, "Tell the mother I'll talk to her." Not to an investigator. To the mother, directly. So, I found myself driving to Seattle on a Thursday morning in June. Interstate 5 stretched north through that familiar green landscape, past exits I'd taken countless times for academic conferences decades ago. Beside me on the passenger seat was the folder containing Webb's report, the photographs of Celeste with Daniel, the documented timeline of her manipulation. It was evidence to share, but also, my credibility to establish. The cafe Kevin chose was in Capitol Hill, a quiet neighborhood spot with good coffee and corner booths. I arrived 30 minutes early, selected a table with a clear sight line to the entrance, and positioned myself to observe. Kevin Morgan entered at the appointed time. He was average height, professionally dressed in business casual, but he carried a visible caution in his body language. I recognized him from the photograph Webb had provided. I stood and extended my hand. "Mr. Morgan? I'm Margaret. Thank you for agreeing to meet me." He shook my hand, assessing me carefully before he sat down. "Your investigator said she's engaged to your son. How old is he?" 37. Kevin winced visibly. Perfect age. Old enough to have assets, young enough to rebuild a career. I was 39 when I met her. I ordered coffee for both of us. I didn't rush into an interrogation. Instead, I asked, "How are you now?" 3 years later. Kevin seemed to appreciate the question. Better. I rebuilt my consulting practice, though I lost a key client in the divorce settlement. She positioned herself on paper as a business partner despite never working a day in her life. The financial recovery took 2 years. The emotional recovery is ongoing. His honesty broke the ice. I responded, I'm trying to prevent my son from experiencing what you experienced. That's why I'm here. Not just for legal ammunition, though I do need that, but to understand what I'm actually fighting. Kevin nodded slowly. You're fighting a professional. She's not a casual con artist. She has studied this, perfected it. She's made it a career. Over the next hour, Kevin described the entire relationship arc. He met Celeste at a networking event where she had positioned herself strategically near the successful attendees. She'd done her research, he said. She knew my company's name, asked intelligent questions about cloud infrastructure. She seemed genuinely interested in my work, not just my income. At least, that's what I thought. The courtship was intense. She matched his interests perfectly, introducing him to expensive new restaurants. After only 4 months, she suggested engagement. She said, when you know, you know. I was flattered. My previous relationships had been cautious, distant. Her certainty felt like validation. The prenuptial contract came with an explanation. She said she'd been hurt before, needed legal clarity, wanted to protect both of us. The contract looked balanced. Equal division of assets acquired during marriage. I didn't understand the clause language. Family assets acquired during marriage, he clarified, actually meant anything either of us inherited or received from relatives became marital property. His father died 8 months into the marriage, leaving him $150,000 and a vintage car collection. According to the prenup, that instantly became a marital asset. The marriage lasted 18 months. She changed after the wedding, he said. Distant, critical, increasingly demanding. She started an affair with a real estate investor. I found hotel receipts. When I confronted her, she filed for divorce immediately. Her attorney was aggressive. Mine was completely outmatched. The settlement cost him $180,000, the car collection, and a 30% stake in his business. Kevin's voice stayed level, but his hands shook slightly as he held his coffee cup. She knew the timing. She waited until the inheritance cleared, then she pulled the trigger. The whole thing was planned from the beginning. I shared my own folder. Webb's investigation. The recorded conversations with Celeste. The timeline of her manipulation of Matthew. Kevin reviewed the materials with a growing, sick recognition. Same pattern. Exactly. Look at this line. Family resource consolidation. She used those exact words with me. It's scripted. He examined the photograph of Celeste with Daniel Kraus. Different man, same dynamic. She always has a backup plan. Someone to fall back on when the mark is exhausted. I asked him directly, would you be willing to provide a written statement? Testify, if necessary, to void her prenuptial contract with my son? Kevin didn't hesitate. Yes. I should have spoken up when the investigator contacted me after she married the second husband. The guilt's been eating at me. If I'd warned him. You're warning me now, I interrupted gently. That's what matters. We drafted the statement together right there on his laptop. A detailed timeline, specific manipulation tactics, the financial outcome, the pattern recognition. Kevin signed it and provided his contact information. Call me anytime. Whatever you need. She shouldn't be allowed to keep doing this. As our meeting concluded, Kevin offered a final insight. Your son won't believe you at first. I wouldn't have believed anyone who tried to warn me. She's that good at creating an alternative reality. She'll have an explanation for everything. The other man is a business associate. The previous marriages ended amicably. Your suspicions are just overprotective paranoia. I acknowledge this fear. It's already happening. He's been distant, canceling our weekly dinners, making excuses. She's orchestrating it, Kevin nodded grimly. Textbook strategy. Separate the target from their support system, especially the skeptics. Your timing is crucial. You need overwhelming evidence, presented at a moment he can't dismiss it. Not a gradual revelation. A single, devastating confrontation with irrefutable proof. I absorbed this advice. I'm building toward that. When I show him, it'll be the complete picture, not a fragment he can rationalize away. Kevin stood and shook my hand firmly. Save your son, Margaret. I wish someone had saved me. I drove back to Portland with Kevin's signed statement secured in the folder beside me. I felt a shift in momentum. The pattern now had human testimony. The abstract had become concrete. But as I crossed back into Oregon, my phone buzzed with a text from Matthew. Mom, sorry to cancel Sunday dinner again. Wedding planning is crazy busy. Celeste says we need to finalize the venue this weekend. Rain check. It was the third cancellation in 4 weeks. I recognized the strategy Kevin had warned me about. Isolation by increments. Each excuse was reasonable on its own, but the cumulative effect was separating the target from protection. I responded simply, of course, sweetheart. Let me know when you're free. But driving through the late afternoon traffic, I did the calculation. The wedding was 10 weeks away. Celeste was accelerating her timeline, consolidating her control over Matthew. My evidence gathering was thorough, but it was time-consuming. The question became a dreadful math problem, a challenge of logistics. Could I build a complete case before the wedding locked Matthew into a legal trap? The answer had to be yes. Kevin Morgan's signed statement joined the growing evidence file. I added it to my command center board, connecting his testimony to Celeste's current manipulation tactics with a piece of red string. The pattern was undeniable now, a professional operation, refined over multiple victims. But collecting evidence and reaching my son were two very different challenges. The Sunday after the Seattle trip, Matthew called. Mom, can we reschedule dinner? Celeste needs help choosing between venues. I agreed. The following Sunday, the photographer meeting ran late. The third Sunday, sorry, Mom. Wedding planning is just overwhelming. We'll catch up soon. 3 consecutive cancellations. Our tradition, which we'd maintained even during his college years abroad, was now abandoned. Celeste was executing exactly what Kevin had warned about, isolation by increments. By mid-July, I understood she'd sensed something. My performance as the naive mother must have slipped, or her instincts detected danger. Either way, she was moving to neutralize me. Wednesday evening, I was preparing dinner when the phone rang. It was Matthew. His voice carried an unfamiliar tension. Mom, we need to talk. Celeste thinks. I've been thinking about our relationship. Warning bells went off immediately. I kept my voice neutral. What about it, sweetheart? You've been distant lately. When we visit, you ask strange questions. And Celeste noticed you're recording conversations. She thinks it's because you don't trust her. My mind raced. How did she know? Did Matthew tell her about the family history project? Honey, those recordings are for preserving family memories. Like I explained. That's what you said. But why do you need to record everything? It feels like surveillance. Like you're looking for problems that don't exist. That phrasing, looking for problems that don't exist, was definitely Celeste's language. Matthew continued, Celeste thinks, maybe you're having trouble letting me go. She says parents sometimes sabotage their kids' relationships because they fear abandonment. Textbook manipulation. Reframe protective concern as selfish control. I responded carefully. I support your happiness, Matthew. I always have. Then why does Celeste feel so unwelcome? Why do you interrogate her about finances and estate planning? I don't interrogate. I engage in conversations she initiates. She says you twist things. That you make innocent questions seem suspicious. The conversation spiraled. Matthew grew defensive. I remained measured, but I felt my son slipping away. The call ended with Matthew saying, maybe we should take a break from dinners until after the wedding. Just to give everyone space to breathe. I agreed. What choice did I have? But I recognized this for what it was, Celeste's victory. Complete isolation achieved. The following morning, I met Patricia Reynolds at her office. I explained the deteriorating relationship with Matthew, Celeste's counterattack. She listened with professional sympathy. This is expected, Margaret. She's protecting her investment. Your son is an asset she's cultivated. She won't let you interfere without a fight. Can I approach him now? I pleaded. Show him the evidence? Patricia shook her head firmly. Partial revelation is dangerous. You'll show him the investigation, and she'll explain it away. Your mother hired a detective because she's paranoid. You present the previous marriages, she'll say, I was young, I made mistakes, I learned from them. You show her the photographs with Daniel Kraus, she'll claim he's a business associate and that your mother is twisting innocent meetings. Every piece of evidence you reveal prematurely becomes an inoculation. She builds antibodies against the truth. So I do nothing while she turns him against me? You continue building the case, she corrected. We need overwhelming proof, presented at a moment she cannot spin it. The wedding day itself might be ideal. I stared at her. The wedding day? It's a public setting. The emotional stakes are high. Her guard will be lowered by her perceived victory. She expects opposition before the wedding. She's defending against that. She will not expect opposition at the wedding. The element of surprise is your advantage. That afternoon, Webb called. She met Daniel again. Downtown Marriott, room 847. Spent 3 hours there yesterday. I couldn't get inside, obviously, but I planted an audio device in the hallway near the door. It's not admissible in court, but it gives us intelligence. He emailed the encrypted audio file. I downloaded it and played the recording through headphones. I heard hotel corridor sounds, an elevator ding, footsteps, then a door opening, Celeste's laugh, and Daniel's lower voice. The door closed, but the device captured their conversation through the poor insulation. The quality was marginal, but the words emerged clearly enough. 10 more weeks of this charade. That was Daniel's voice. 8. The wedding's August 16th. After that, the timeline accelerates. That was Celeste. And the father? Handled, she said, her voice cold. I've isolated the son effectively. The old woman can suspect whatever she wants. Matthew won't believe her now. There was the sound of ice in a glass, movement. Daniel spoke again. You said that about Morgan's brother. He nearly derailed everything. This is different. Matthew is more malleable. No close family except his mother. And I've poisoned that relationship. After the wedding, the prenup activates. Give it 18 months. 18 months playing the devoted wife. I've done longer. Remember that contractor? 2 years of that tedium. This one's easier. He actually believes I love him. They both laughed. A cruel, shared sound. I stopped the playback. I sat in the silence, hearing her voice, not the warm, engaging tone she used with me, but the cold calculation. This crystallized everything. This wasn't a romance gone wrong. It was premeditated fraud, and Matthew was completely blind to it. The following Sunday, I violated my own strategic patience. I drove to Matthew's apartment unannounced, hoping to catch him alone. He answered the door with surprise that bordered on irritation. Mom? What are you doing here? I wanted to see you. We've barely talked in weeks. He didn't invite me inside. We just talked in the doorway, awkward and stilted. I tried an indirect approach. Sweetheart, have you had an independent attorney review that prenuptial contract? Why would I need that? Celeste's attorney drafted it fairly. It's just standard practice, Matthew, to have separate legal counsel. Mom, stop, he snapped. This is exactly what Celeste warned about. You're trying to undermine our relationship. I'm trying to protect. I don't need protection, he said, his voice rising. I'm 37 years old. I'm capable of making my own decisions. I saw Celeste's purse on the entry table. I realized she was inside, listening. She had probably coached this entire exchange. Matthew, please, just listen to me. No, you listen. If you can't support this marriage, maybe you shouldn't attend the wedding. Think about that. He closed the door in my face that I stood in the empty hallway, feeling the total, crushing weight of defeat. Driving home, I finally understood. Patricia was right. A partial approach had failed. I needed overwhelming confrontation, not gentle persuasion. Back home, I updated the case board with the latest developments. I created a new section, counterattack timeline. I documented each canceled dinner, Matthew's changing language, Celeste's escalating control. I added the transcript of the hotel recording and the new photographs Webb had captured. The evidence now covered an entire wall. Financial documents, surveillance photos, Kevin Morgan's testimony, my own recorded conversations, timeline analysis. Any objective observer would see the clear pattern. But Matthew wasn't an objective observer. He was the target, the mark, the victim in progress. I stood before the board, like a professor analyzing a complex, failing thesis. The foundation was solid. The legal framework through Patricia. The victim testimony through Kevin. The surveillance evidence through Webb. The documented manipulation through my recordings. But timing remained the critical variable. Strike too early, the whole structure collapsed. Wait too long, and Matthew was legally trapped. The wedding date, August 16th, loomed like a dreadful deadline. It was 8 weeks away now. I made my decision. I would let Celeste think she'd won. I would play the defeated mother, accepting her loss. I would lower her guard completely. Then, at the wedding, when she was at her most vulnerable, most confident, and most exposed, I would strike decisively. No warning. No mercy. Complete revelation. Late July bled into early August. Weeks of silence from Matthew. No calls, no texts. Complete radio silence. I maintained my strategic withdrawal, resisting every agonizing urge to reach out. I let Celeste believe she'd won. I let her guard drop. Meanwhile, the work continued. Webb submitted his final surveillance reports. Celeste and Daniel had met 4 times in 10 days as the wedding approached: hotel rooms, expensive restaurants, extended afternoons at his waterfront condo. Each meeting was documented, photographed, and time-stamped. The pattern was clear: they were planning the post-wedding phase, confident in their scheme. Patricia Reynolds organized the evidence into a legal presentation. Victim testimony, financial documentation, surveillance, recorded conversations, the prenup analysis. This would convince any judge, Margaret, she said. But your audience is your son, not a court. Arrange these materials for emotional impact, not just legal strength. 2 weeks before the wedding, I was ready. Then the phone rang. It was Wednesday evening, August 6th. I was in my command center, arranging evidence packets, when Matthew's name appeared on my screen. It was the first call in 3 weeks. Dad? Mom? His voice was uncertain, almost sheepish. Hi, son. A long silence stretched between us. Then, the wedding Saturday. I know we've had distance lately, but you're still my mother. I want you there. I was careful. Does Celeste want me there? He trailed off. She thinks maybe it's not a good idea. But it's my wedding, too. I'm inviting you. I appreciate that, Matthew. Of course, I'll attend. Really? He said, surprised. I thought maybe I support your happiness, Matthew. I always have. More silence. I sensed he wanted to say more, but couldn't quite form the words. Finally, the ceremony's at 3 p.m. Brookside Country Club. Reception following. You don't have to stay long, if it's awkward. I'll stay as long as is appropriate, I said. But I need to tell you something important at the wedding. Will you give me a few minutes of your time, before or after the ceremony? Your choice. Important? Like what? His defensive tone returned. Information you need to have. About your future. Your marriage. Mom, if this is more criticism of Celeste. It's information. What you do with it is your choice. Just promise you'll listen. Reluctantly, fine. After the ceremony. A brief conversation. Thank you, sweetheart. That's all I ask. The call ended. I sat motionless, processing. Matthew, reaching out despite Celeste's objection. It suggested the manipulation wasn't absolute. Some part of him still valued our relationship, still wanted his mother's presence. This complicated the emotional calculus. The revelation would devastate him, but the alternative was so much worse. The first week of August, I transformed months of accumulated materials into a strategic presentation. I created 3 identical evidence packets, one for Matthew, one for Patricia as legal backup, and one for my own reference. Each packet was organized chronologically, with thesis-like precision. Section 1, The Pattern. Kevin Morgan's written testimony, financial records of her previous divorces, and the pattern analysis. Section 2, The Current Deception. Web surveillance photographs of Celeste with Daniel spanning 3 months. Hotel records. A timeline showing their meetings throughout her courtship with Matthew. Section 3, The Manipulation. Transcripts of my recorded conversations, highlighting her financial probing, the estate planning pressure, and the isolation tactics. Section 4, The Smoking Gun. The full transcript of the hotel hallway recording, where Celeste and Daniel discuss the timeline, the financial calculations, and the explicit acknowledgement of the entire scheme. Section 5, The Legal Analysis. Patricia's assessment of the prenuptial contract, the clear indicators of fraud, and the grounds for annulment. Each section was marked with color-coded tabs, key passages highlighted. The presentation was a masterwork of academic organization, a logical flow that built the evidence systematically, culminating in an undeniable conclusion. I sealed the packets in professional folders, labeled them simply, The Truth About Celeste Morgan. I stored 2 copies in my safe and kept one accessible for the wedding day. I also created a digital backup on an encrypted USB drive. If the physical materials were somehow compromised, the evidence would survive. On August 8, I met Patricia for what we both understood was the final pre-confrontation session. She reviewed the evidence packets and pronounced them devastating. Then, she addressed the practical concerns. A wedding day revelation is a high-risk strategy, Margaret. Matthew will be emotionally vulnerable, potentially defensive. Celeste will try to control the narrative immediately. You must present everything at once. Give him no time to process it through her filter. What's your recommendation? Pull him aside privately after the ceremony, if possible. Find a moment when you can speak to him alone with the evidence. She paused. And what's your extraction plan? Extraction? After the revelation, Matthew will need space away from Celeste to process. She will try to isolate him immediately, to spin the evidence. You need somewhere he can go. Your house, a hotel room, anywhere she can't follow. I hadn't considered this. My house. I'll insist he come home with me to discuss it. Patricia nodded. Good. Have a bag packed for him. Clothes, toiletries, whatever he might need for a few days. Show him you're prepared to support him through the aftermath. On August 10, Webb delivered his concluding investigation materials. The final photographs showed Celeste and Daniel at a waterfront restaurant just 3 days prior, their conversation apparently intense. Based on their body language and the duration, 2 hours, I'd say they're finalizing their post-wedding plans, Webb reported. She's stressed. He's reassuring. The timeline's approaching, and she's feeling the pressure. Webb also provided financial intelligence. I pulled Daniel's recent transactions through a source I have. He's paid for all their hotel rooms, their dinners, and even bought her expensive jewelry she probably won't wear around Matthew. He's invested significantly in this relationship. I absorbed this additional dimension. So Daniel's a victim, too, in his way. A willing victim, Webb corrected. He knows what she's doing to your son. That recording proved it. He's complicit. Webb extended his hand. Good luck, Margaret. This has been the most satisfying case in years. Stopping a predator before she completes the cycle. August 12th, evening. For days before the wedding, I was reviewing the evidence packets when the phone rang again. Matthew's voice. Ceremonies at 3 p.m. Brookside Country Club. I know I already told you, but I just wanted to make sure you're really coming. I'll be there, son. Okay. Thanks, Mom. After he hung up, I sat in the silence. That night, I wrote a letter to Matthew. I sealed it in an envelope, to be opened only if the confrontation went catastrophically wrong. It was an explanation of the investigation, my motivation, the evidence, and its location. An apology for the method, but not for the intention. I placed the letter in my safe deposit box with instructions from my attorney. A backup plan, in case of the worst possible outcomes. August 15th, Friday evening. The night before the confrontation. I prepared methodically. I laid out my formal suit. I ensured the evidence folder was ready. I tested the recording device, a small digital recorder that would fit in my jacket pocket. I reviewed the key talking points for my presentation. I ate a light dinner. I needed a calm stomach tomorrow. I sat in the command center one final time, reviewing the evidence board. Months of work, all compressed into tomorrow's few minutes. I photographed the entire board with my phone, a visual record of the investigation's evolution. Then, I systematically dismantled it. I filed the materials. The command center transformed back into a guest bedroom. The physical evidence was removed, but the psychological preparation was complete. That night, sleep was elusive. I lay in the darkness, my mind running through all the scenarios. The best case, Matthew sees the truth immediately, leaves with me, and cuts all contact with Celeste. The worst case, Matthew believes her spin, chooses his fiancée over his mother, and proceeds with the wedding. And the most likely, confusion, denial, and a gradual, agonizing acceptance over hours or days that I was prepared for all scenarios, but I truly hoped for swift recognition. As dawn approached, I finally slept briefly, dreaming not of lesson plans or tenure, but of gardens, some with strong roots, others collapsing from rot. I woke at 6 a.m. The wedding day had arrived. The morning came with those gray Portland skies, threatening rain that never quite fell. I dressed methodically, a formal charcoal suit, a silk blouse. The evidence folder slipped into my jacket's inner pocket. Its weight was barely noticeable, but its presence was constant. I tested the digital recorder one final time. The battery was full, the memory clear, the voice-activated function engaged that I arrived at the Brookside Country Club 90 minutes before the ceremony. I wanted to observe the setup, understand the venue's layout, and identify a private space where the post-ceremony conversation with Matthew could happen. The club occupied a rolling hillside overlooking the valley, all manicured lawns, vintage architecture, and discreet wealth. The parking lot was already filling with expensive vehicles. Inside, it was the controlled chaos of final preparations, florists adjusting arrangements, caterers organizing the reception hall, a photographer testing lighting angles. I positioned myself strategically for the ceremony, back row, aisle seat, clear sight line. Guests arrived in waves. Celeste's side filled quickly with well-dressed strangers. Matthew's side remained sparse, clear evidence of the isolation she had engineered. I recognized a few of his colleagues, but no close friends. The wedding party assembled. Then the processional music began. Celeste appeared at the aisle's head, objectively beautiful in an elaborate white gown that probably cost $15,000. She walked toward Matthew with practiced grace, her smile radiating confidence. I activated the recording device with a subtle touch in my pocket. Vows were exchanged. I promised to love, honor, and cherish. Each word from Celeste's mouth was a documented lie. Rings were placed. I now pronounce you husband and wife. The guests applauded. The couple kissed. I watched my son seal a legal trap, knowing I had perhaps 30 minutes to spring him free. The reception began in the adjacent ballroom. The cocktail hour proceeded. Champagne flowed, appetizers circulated. I maintained a peripheral position, declined any alcohol, and observed. Celeste remained attached to Matthew's arm, steering his conversations, intercepting anyone who approached him independently. Classic control behavior. I tracked the venue layout mentally. I identified the optimal private space, a small library off the main hallway. A door that closed. Windows for light. Furniture suitable for reviewing documents. The reception transitioned to a seated dinner. The assigned seating placed me at table 8, far from the head table where the newlyweds sat elevated. A deliberate slight, undoubtedly Celeste's arrangement. Throughout dinner, I watched her. She was radiant, victorious, completely confident. Perfect. Then dessert concluded, and the DJ announced, "Now we'll hear from the bride's parents," followed by the mother of the groom. Before the toasts began, Celeste excused herself from the head table. She detoured to my table and leaned down close, her voice low enough that only I could hear. "Margaret, I want to thank you. You raised a wonderful son. Your job is complete now." She paused, gauging my reaction. I remained expressionless. "This is my family now. Matthew and I discussed it. We need space to build our marriage without interference. Meaning, you should probably leave soon. You've been here for the ceremony. That's sufficient." "Matthew asked me to stay for the toasts," I said calmly. "Matthew asks for many things when he's being sentimental. I'm telling you what's actually best for him." And then her mask slipped, just slightly, the contempt breaking through. "Frankly, your presence here, you don't fit. Not with our friends, our lifestyle, our future. Go home. Don't come back." She straightened, smoothing her dress that I spoke quietly. "All right, Celeste." She smiled, vindicated. "But I'm taking someone with me when I leave." She paused, processing this. "Taking someone? What does that mean?" "You'll see shortly." Something in my tone finally registered. Her confidence wavered, microscopically. "What?" "Enjoy your reception, Celeste. What's left of it." I stood and walked toward the DJ booth. She watched me, uncertainty blooming into concern, but she couldn't pursue me without creating a scene. I reached the DJ booth just as the bride's parents concluded their generic well wishes. The DJ extended the microphone. "You're next, ma'am." The mother of the groom. I accepted the microphone and stepped to where the entire reception could see me. 200 faces turned in my direction. Matthew watched from the head table, anxious, but expecting a conventional toast. Celeste's expression showed the first real alarm. "Thank you all for attending this celebration. I'm Margaret, Matthew's mother." A standard opening. The guests relaxed slightly. Traditionally, this is the moment for a toast. A celebration. Well wishes. Welcoming a new family member. I paused. I'm not giving that toast. What I have to say is more important than tradition. "Matthew." I looked directly at my son. "I need to speak with you privately. Immediately. This cannot wait." The room's energy shifted, sensing the irregularity. Matthew half stood. "Mom? What are you?" "Matthew, I need to speak with you privately right now. This is extraordinarily important." Silence blanketed the reception. Celeste's face drained of color. Margaret, this can wait. Let's continue the reception. We can address family matters later. No, I interrupted firmly. This cannot wait. Matthew, give me 10 minutes. A private conversation. What I show you will change everything. The reception was frozen in confused silence. Guests whispered, uncertain whether this was planned drama or a real conflict. Matthew stood fully, torn between my urgency and Celeste's restraining hand on his arm. She hissed something inaudible. He shook his head and stepped away from the table. 10 minutes, Mom. Then you need to explain why you're disrupting my wedding. He walked toward me. Celeste rose to follow. I raised my hand. Just Matthew. This conversation is between mother and son. He's my husband now, Celeste protested. I have a right. You have no rights to this conversation. Matthew, please. The library, down that hall. Just us. Matthew nodded, his uncertainty clear, but his curiosity stronger. We walked toward the exit. Behind us, Celeste called, Matthew, don't let her manipulate you. Whatever she's about to say. Her voice faded as we entered the hallway. I guided my son to the library, opened the door, and gestured inside. Matthew entered. I followed and closed the door firmly. Through the wood, we could hear the muffled sounds of the agitated reception. We were alone now. The moment of truth had arrived. The library door clicked shut. The silence pressed against us, thick, anticipatory. Matthew stood near a bookshelf, arms crossed defensively, his jaw set. His wedding suit was still perfect, the boutonniere still fresh. He had been a husband for less than 3 hours. All right, he said tersely. 10 minutes. You've destroyed my wedding reception for this. Show me whatever evidence justifies that. I removed the folder from my jacket and placed it on the mahogany table in the center of the room. It was maybe 2 inches thick, months of investigation compressed into portable form. My hands were steady. I had spent too long preparing for this moment to tremble now. Before I open this, understand something. Everything inside was legally obtained. Nothing was fabricated, nothing misinterpreted. There is independent verification available for every claim. Why are you talking like a lawyer, Mom? Just show me. I opened the folder to the first section. This is testimony from Kevin Morgan. Matthew frowned. Who? Celeste's first husband. His expression flickered with surprise. She told me she'd never been married. I slid the document across the table. Read it. He picked up the pages reluctantly and began scanning. Kevin's statement was detailed, the courtship timeline, the engagement after 4 months, the prenuptial contract, the marriage duration, the financial manipulation, the divorce settlement costing him $180,000 plus a business stake. Matthew read slowly, the color beginning to drain from his face. This could be fake. Anyone could write this. Kevin signed it. It's a notarized statement. He's willing to testify under oath. Here's his contact information. Call him right now if you doubt it. I pushed my phone across the table. Matthew stared at the document, not reaching for the phone. There's a second husband, I continued quietly. James Pritchard. A similar pattern, a similar outcome. She's done this before, Matthew. Twice. You're the third target. No. The word came out weak. She would have told me. Why would she tell you? That information destroys the illusion she's so carefully built. I opened the second section. Photographs spilled across the table. Celeste and Daniel Kraus at restaurants, entering hotels, walking through parks. Timestamp spanning March through August. Who is that? Matthew asked, his voice hollow. Daniel Kraus. A real estate agent. They've been involved for at least 8 months. Longer than she's known you. I laid out the images chronologically. An early March meeting. An April hotel visit. A May afternoon at his condo. Continuing through 2 weeks ago. Every time she claimed a late work meeting or a client showing, she was with him. Matthew picked up a photograph showing them kissing outside a hotel entrance. His hand trembled. You hired a private investigator? To follow my fiancé? I hired an investigator after I accidentally saw them together, Matthew. Would you have believed me without proof? This doesn't mean, maybe it ended before we got serious. It didn't end. Look at the dates. This one, I pointed to a recent photo, was taken 3 days before your wedding. I opened the third section. Financial documents. Look at the divorce settlements. The pattern of timing. Marry quickly, stay 18 months to 2 years, file for divorce once significant assets have been acquired. Your prenup, it's designed to maximize her financial access after 1 year. Stop. Matthew's voice broke. This is. He couldn't finish. I pressed forward. I had to complete the presentation while his defenses were crumbling. During the wedding planning, I recorded our family conversations. You gave me permission, remember? The Family History Project? Matthew nodded numbly. I recorded them because I suspected manipulation. Listen. I opened my laptop, cued the audio files, and pressed play. Celeste's voice filled the library, warm and concerned. Margaret, have you updated your will recently? Estate planning is so important. The recording continued through her probing questions about my property value, inheritance structure, and succession planning. Each clip showed calculated financial interests masked as helpful concern. Matthew listened with growing horror. One more piece, I said. The most important. I cued the final audio file. This was recorded in a hotel hallway. The audio quality isn't perfect, but the words are clear enough. I pressed play. Celeste's voice emerged, talking to Daniel. 8 more weeks of this charade. Her laugh, cruel and calculated. Daniel's voice, and the mother? She's a problem. Celeste, handled. I've isolated the son effectively. The old woman can suspect whatever she wants. Matthew won't believe her now. Sound of movement, ice clinking. Daniel, you said that about Morgan's brother. Celeste, this is different. Matthew is more malleable. After the wedding, the prenup activates. Give it 18 months. Daniel, 18 months playing devoted wife. Celeste, I've done longer. This one's easier. He actually believes I love him. Their laughter. I stopped the playback. The silence crushed the library. Matthew sat frozen, his face completely drained of color. His breathing had gone shallow. For 30 seconds, he didn't move. Then, that's her voice. Not a question. A statement. Yes. She called our marriage a charade? Yes. She said. I'm malleable. That I actually believe she loves me. His voice cracked on the final words. I'm so sorry, sweetheart. He stood abruptly and paced to the window, staring out at the manicured grounds where, hours ago, he'd married the woman whose voice still echoed. He actually believes I love him. The prenuptial contract, I said gently, it's designed to maximize her financial access. If you stay married 12 months, she's entitled to 40% of assets acquired during the marriage. It's a legal trap disguised as mutual protection. Matthew turned from the window. His face had transformed. The shock was giving way to something colder. She planned this. From the beginning. Researched me, targeted me, performed caring girlfriend, manipulated me away from you, married me, all for money. Yes. What do I do? His voice was empty. The first decision is simple. Do you continue this reception, celebrating a marriage that's built on lies? Or do you end it now? He looked at the closed door. Beyond it, 200 guests waited. Celeste waited. "I end it," he said quietly, then louder. "I end it now." He walked to the door, yanked it open, and strode down the hallway toward the reception. I followed, carrying the folder. We entered the reception hall together. The music stopped. The DJ noticed our entrance. Conversations died as guests turned. Celeste stood from the head table, relief crossing her face, until she saw Matthew's expression. He walked directly to her, stopping 3 feet away. The entire room was watching. "The wedding is cancelled," Matthew announced, his voice carrying to every corner. Gasps rippled through the guests. Celeste's face went white. "Everyone can leave. The reception is over. I apologize for the disruption, but this marriage was a mistake. Please go." He turned and walked back toward the exit. Celeste found her voice. "Matthew. What did she tell you?" "What lies?" "The truth," Matthew said without turning. "About Daniel. About your previous marriages. About your plans for our marriage. She's lying. She's manipulating you. She showed you fabricated evidence." Matthew stopped and turned. "I heard your voice on a recording, Celeste. Discussing your timeline. Calling me malleable. Laughing about how I actually believe you love me." Her face drained further. That was taken out of context." "What context?" he shot back. "Makes 18 months of charade acceptable?" She had no answer. "Stop. Just stop, Celeste." He looked at the confused guests. "Please leave. This is over." Celeste turned on me, screaming. You destroyed my wedding. I'll sue you for harassment, defamation, invasion of privacy." "Everything was obtained legally," I said calmly. "One-party consent recording laws, standard surveillance, voluntary testimony. Your attorney will confirm it's admissible. You'll regret this. Both of you. I'll take everything in court." "You'll get nothing," Matthew said, his voice cold. "The prenup is void due to fraud. My attorney has already prepared the annulment papers." He walked toward the exit. I followed. Behind us, chaos erupted. Guests standing, confused conversations, Celeste's voice rising in a desperate protest. We pushed through the doors into the evening air. Mother and son. Together. We drove away from the Brookside Country Club in silence. Matthew sat in the passenger seat, still wearing his wedding suit, minus the boutonniere he'd torn off and discarded. His hands trembled slightly, the shock settling into his system like a poison. At my house, he went directly to the guest room, his childhood bedroom, essentially unchanged, and stayed there for 3 hours. I didn't intrude. I let him process alone. When he emerged, his face was blotchy from crying, but his voice was steady. "Tell me what happens next." "Legally." That night, we called Patricia Reynolds. She arrived within the hour, spread the evidence across my dining table, and explained the legal strategy. Matthew listened like a man receiving a terminal diagnosis, absorbing information about the dissolution of the life he thought he'd built. 5 days later, Celeste's attorney served papers. She was suing for breach of contract and emotional damages for $1 million. Patricia smiled when she read it. Perfect. She's engaging on legal ground where we are strongest. We met in Patricia's office a week after the wedding confrontation. The morning light streamed through the windows. The 3 of us sat around a conference table covered with legal documents and evidence files. Patricia reviewed Celeste's lawsuit with professional detachment. "She's claiming you breached the prenuptial contract by refusing to honor the marriage, seeking enforcement of contract terms plus emotional distress damages. Classic aggressive posturing meant to intimidate you into a settlement." Matthew looked exhausted. "Can she win?" "No. The contract was procured through fraud. Your mother documented that extensively." but will need to prove fraudulent intent in court. That means presenting all the evidence publicly. Kevin Morgan's testimony, the surveillance, the recordings, the financial analysis. She paused, assessing Matthew carefully. This will be painful. Your private humiliation will become public record. Celeste's attorneys will argue you were a willing participant who simply changed his mind. They'll paint you as vindictive. Let them, Matthew said, his voice hard. Because we have her voice on a recording, calling the marriage a charade, discussing an 18-month timeline, and laughing about my belief in her love. We have 2 previous victims with identical patterns. Patricia organized the papers. The hearing is scheduled 2 weeks out. I'll file a countermotion to void the contract based on fraud, and I will request the court also refer the matter to the district attorney for a criminal investigation. The week before the hearing, Patricia conducted practice testimony with Matthew. She played the opposing counsel, attacking his credibility with brutal efficiency. Mr. Boyd, isn't it true you willingly pursued a relationship with Ms. Morgan? That you proposed marriage? That you signed the prenuptial agreement after reviewing its terms? Matthew, exhausted from the emotional turmoil, struggled to maintain his composure. Yes, but I didn't know. Didn't know what? That relationships require trust? Or did you simply regret your decision and concoct this elaborate fraud narrative to escape the consequences? Your mother hired a private investigator, recorded private conversations. These are the actions of paranoid, controlling individuals, not victims. Matthew's hands clenched. Patricia softened, returning to her normal tone. That's what they'll do. They will twist the facts and attack your character. You need to stay calm. Stick to the evidence. When they attack, you respond simply, I believed I was in an honest relationship. The evidence proved otherwise. The courthouse hearing room was smaller than I expected. Wood paneling, a judge's bench, gallery seating. Celeste sat at the plaintiff's table with 2 attorneys, wearing a designer suit, projecting confidence. She avoided eye contact with us. The judge reviewed the filings with evident skepticism towards Celeste's claims. Patricia presented our case first. Your Honor, this isn't a simple contract dispute. It's the exposure of systematic fraud. Ms. Morgan has a pattern of targeting financially stable individuals, marrying quickly, positioning herself legally, and then divorcing profitably. Mr. Boyd is the 3rd known victim. She called Kevin Morgan to the stand. He was sworn in and recounted his experience. Celeste's attorney objected repeatedly, irrelevant, but the judge allowed the testimony. Pattern evidence is relevant to fraudulent intent claims, she stated flatly. Kevin was articulate, detailed, and credible, describing the identical courtship tactics, prenuptial manipulation, and financial devastation. Under cross-examination, Celeste's attorney tried discrediting him. Isn't it true you're bitter about your divorce? That you've contacted Ms. Morgan's subsequent partners seeking revenge? I contacted this young man's mother, Kevin corrected firmly, to prevent him from suffering what I suffered. That's not revenge. That's decency. The observers in the gallery took visible notice. Patricia then played the hotel recording. The courtroom heard Celeste's voice. 18 months of charade. He actually believes I love him. Laughter. The judge's expression hardened. Celeste whispered urgently to her attorneys. A forensic accountant testified about Celeste's divorce settlements, showing a clear pattern of timing and extraction. The judge delivered her ruling from the bench. Having reviewed the evidence, including the recorded admissions, testimony from a previous victim, and the financial analysis, this court finds that the prenuptial agreement was procured through fraudulent misrepresentation and concealment of material facts. The contract is void. Plaintiff's claims for breach and damages are dismissed, with prejudice. She paused, consulting her notes. Furthermore, the evidence suggests potential criminal fraud. The court is referring this matter to the Multnomah County District Attorney for investigation. Ms. Morgan, you should consult with a criminal defense attorney. The gavel struck. Celeste's face went ashen. Her attorneys immediately requested a private conference. Patricia leaned toward us. That's a complete victory. She has nothing now. Outside the courthouse, the late August sunshine felt surreal. Reporters approached, but Patricia deflected them. Matthew stood on the steps, physically present but emotionally distant. It's over, he asked quietly. The civil case is over, I confirmed. The criminal investigation is beginning. But for you, yes. You're free. He nodded slowly, processing. I still can't believe I didn't see it. Every sign was there. She's a professional, sweetheart. That's the point. Making her marks not see the signs. We walked to the parking structure. As we reached my car, my phone buzzed. A text from Webb. Daniel Kraus just posted a public statement distancing himself from Celeste. Claims he was misled about the nature of her relationship with Matthew. Rats fleeing a sinking ship. I showed Matthew the message. He read it without expression. Then, finally, something like satisfaction crossed his face. Good, he said. Let everyone know what she is. We drove home together. Weeks passed. Matthew stayed in my guest room, emerging gradually from the shock. The first week, he was mostly silent. The second week, small conversations. The third week brought the apology I hadn't requested, but he needed to give. Mom, I owe you an apology, Matthew said one evening. For doubting you. For choosing her manipulation over your protection. You saw what I couldn't. I'm so sorry. You trusted someone you loved, I replied. That's human nature. She exploited it professionally. But you listened when it mattered. At the wedding, you gave me those 10 minutes. That took courage. How do we fix us? Our relationship? The same way you'd fix any structure, I suppose. Assess the foundation. Repair the cracks. Rebuild systematically. We resumed our Sunday dinners. A simple routine. Gradually rebuilding the connection. The fourth Sunday, he mentioned starting therapy with a counselor specializing in manipulation recovery. She's helping me identify the tactics I missed, he said. That awareness prevents a repeat, I confirmed. A month later, Matthew raised the finances. The wedding cost $50,000. My savings are gone. I'll loan you $50,000, I said. 3% interest, 5-year repayment. He looked surprised. Mom, you don't have to charge interest. This is a loan, not a gift. Loans preserve responsibility. You'll repay this because you'll take ownership of your recovery. He signed the agreement carefully. Thank you. For treating me like an adult who made an expensive mistake. Early September, Patricia called with updates. The DA accepted Celeste's plea deal, 3 years probation, restitution, and a criminal record. She left Portland. Her real estate license was revoked, her reputation destroyed. Based on your case, Margaret, Patricia added, the DA found 2 additional potential victims. You stopped a serial predator. Late that afternoon, Matthew and I stood on my terrace, overlooking Portland. The sunset painted the sky orange and purple. I've been thinking about trust, Matthew said. I trusted her blindly. Now I'm paranoid. Neither is healthy. Trust is important, I agreed. But verification is more important. Trust, but verify. Watch for consistency between words and actions. Celeste's words were perfect. Her actions revealed the truth. Like checking the citations on a thesis, he said. The argument can be beautiful, but you verify the sources. Exactly, I smiled. You're a professor's son, after all. He smiled. The first genuine smile I'd seen in months. I'm lucky. Some people don't have a mother who builds a legal case to save them. Some do, I said. They just need to recognize the protection when it's offered. I recognize it now. We stood in comfortable silence as the sun set. Our relationship was healed. Justice had been served. A fresh start was established. My work was complete.